All right, welcome back. We're live, and we are going to do another Packers mock draft tonight. 5 weeks out from the draft now, and you know, the dust has settled a little bit from free agency. No major moves, just keeping some more of our guys as we expected. The latest being Eric Wilson at linebacker, and that solves all the problems at linebacker, right? So we don't need to worry about that going into the draft. But I really wanted to focus today, kind of looking at um, a comment that James Bayless made on the previous mock draft was kind of talking about going up to get um, Jerzon Newton, which, he suggested the idea of, maybe not relying on Eric Stokes given his health and trading him with 25 to move to get Jerzon Newton. In the last couple weeks, his stock is kind of not so much that his stock has dropped, but Johnny Newton's stock has shown him going a little bit closer to where Green Bay is actually going to pick. And so he's been there in a number of simulations that I've done leading up to this. So we'll see if that's something that maybe we just monitor and we look at targeting that in the first round. I know everybody's thinking tackle, especially because there's a heavy run on tackles that is going to happen early in this. And then also cornerback being a premium position that we would go after rather than going after another defensive tackle in the first round, which to date hasn't panned out quite to the value that they would probably want out of Devontae Wyatt. So, without further ado, we're going to look at this as we get through it. We're going to do 4 rounds today, and if you have any thoughts or comments on who's up on the board as we're going through this, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I'll address them as we go. So we're going to use the PFF mock draft simulator again. Actually, going to adjust the settings mostly towards the public consensus boards, but a little bit on PFF's ratings as well. And we'll just kind of monitor to see how this thing's going as we get into it. And not as tackle heavy just yet as I was expecting it to be. So tackle is looking like it might be a position we have some options here. And we didn't need to trade up to get Johnny Newton in this particular case. So that's something we can consider here. I don't love the way that affects the rest of the positions that we need to address in the second and third rounds as we get into this a little bit more going defensive interior that early. I think there's some options of guys that we would like, at 41 or 58 even that we might consider there, just going with the value of what is at, pick 25 instead. So, heard a little bit earlier today about Jackson Powers Johnson kind of, falling out of the first round potentially. Just that, maybe draft analysts or the media is higher on JPJ than the NFL, the league itself is. So it's interesting to watch that. Another guy I really like there. Obviously, we saw Tyler Newton's, you know, Raz score, and that basically disqualifies him from being, a big draft target for the Packers. Unfortunately, just a little slow and not particularly explosive, though it's noteworthy that, he is coming off of a knee injury. So he's still rehabbing that. And there's going to be a little bit of a lack of production in a explosiveness kind of sense until he's 100%. But that's one of those things that really it's probably just in his best interest if he just didn't test in that spot and left it up for, his film to speak for itself, which I didn't really notice anything particularly bad from the way he plays on film. That would have been a big, you know, question mark or red flag for him. Um, I think if we're looking at tackle here, let's go back up and take a look at first off tackle, and then I'll throw cornerback into this mix as well. Um, so you see Tyler Guyton, who outside of Green Bay's typical thresholds being that he's 6'7" and 320, how many pounds? 327 pounds. So a big guy, but he moved pretty well. So um, a project kind of left tackle of the future potentially there, which this would be the spot that you'd want to maybe go after something like that. Later on, Jordan Morgan is a name that we've heard, buzz around the Packers before. So interesting there. And then as we get a little bit further down, Kingsley Suamatia, who is still, work in progress, but lots of potential there as well. And then the other spot being cornerback that you'd kind of look at, and Kool-Aid McKinstry, who tested well despite still recovering from a Liz Frank injury in his foot. Um, Very tempting and very plausible candidate for the Packers to go after. He's got the nice size, 6'1", 195, meets their height and weight thresholds. And this one right here, age, is a big factor that the Packers like to consider when they're doing this. And then pedigree from Alabama, playing against the best competition in the SEC. Um, I think he's a very likely candidate here. Um, hmm. I'm going to go and I'm gonna take Kool-Aid McKinstry because I think he fits more what the Packers would actually go with here at that spot. Let's see. So Johnny Newton goes 3, 4 picks later. Newman comes off the board a little earlier than he probably actually will still in this one. Um, and it looks like it played out somewhat well on the tackle side of things. And I think the easy choice for me here is, at pick 41, I was really looking at tackle or corner, whichever we didn't get with that first pick. Corner could be addressed a little bit later, still, had I not gone with Kool-Aid in this one, or defensive interior, which I think if we look at that really quick, they've got some guys, Braden Fisk is, we're right in that range. Rukaroro, Chris Jenkins is obviously a guy that I've spoken about before. I really like him, and Brandon Dorless, I've heard a little bit, would be as a guy that the Packers would be potentially interested in as well. Um, but with this one, just based on the tackle situation and how they're going off the board, I'm going to go with Kingsley Suamatia here to give us that premium position earlier in the draft, and we'll be able to look at addressing some of those things a little bit later. 58 is a spot that if he's still there, um, I would look at linebacker at this point, and this would be for primarily Cooper if he was still available, but unfortunately he's off the board here. So the next best option at that point would be uh, Junior Colson. It's a matter of it's a little bit higher than him, so it might be a little bit of a reach, but it's definitely a position of need. And after that point, let's see, let's go back to linebacker. We're looking down towards 88 where we're going to pick next, that we might be able to pick up Jeremiah Trotter if he doesn't end up going earlier than that. And then past that, we're looking at fourth round guys. So definitely going to take Junior Colson, just obviously the biggest position of need on the Packers roster at this point. A couple guys I wish we would have been able to keep, in that range were Chris Jenkins and Marshawn Nealon, who I didn't talk about just now. Edge rusher that, I think he's a steady guy that the Packers would be very interested in. And edge is somewhat of a position that I expect that they'll look at in the first, two rounds of the draft, probably just because of the fact that you can never have too much pass rush. And two, JJ Nagbare is going to be out for most of the year. And you could backfill a guy who's going to be out for a bunch of the year, and then also be developing the guy that's going to probably step in to fill some more of, a Preston Smith type of role, even though we know like Gary's there, but you always want to have at least 3, up and coming or, premium edge rushers to go after it with. So here at 88, now I'm really looking at safety again, because we still need to have a running mate alongside Xavier McKinney back there. So, this is a spot Cam Kinchins is falling further down the board. His testing did not show up. I still like his tape a lot. The other guy that would be interesting here, and probably more at 91, would be Taylor Demerson, who is a physical athlete there as well. A guy that I would have really liked to have gotten, on day 2 or in the second round rather, would have been Javon Bullard as well, who I think, while some of his testing or his numbers showed that he played better actually from the slot and not as much from safety, I still think he has that kind of physicality in the game that would pair well with Xavier McKinney. So, um, yeah, let's take a look. With both of them being here, Kinchins or Demerson, I'm comfortable with either of them really. So I'm gonna actually look elsewhere at this pick beside safety just to see what we've got, because if I doubt both of them are going to go to Tampa Bay and Arizona in the next two picks between 88 and 91. So I'm counting on one of them still being there in this next pick. Hmm. Yeah, we haven't really gone to the interior of the offensive line yet with this draft, and that's definitely a spot we need to get some more bodies into the rotation there. Um, a couple guys that we can see here just off the cuff are Christian Mahogany, who, I mean, I've recently heard that he might actually be a better prospect for center than guard, which is interesting because who's going to know that better than Jeff Halfley, probably coming from Boston College as his head coach. And then you've got the SEC kid from Georgia, Cedric Van Pran, and then you've got the small school kid, Mason McCormick, who tested phenomenally. So any of them are interesting. And even this tackle, Dominic Pooney, who, we talked about the offensive line testing and the short shuttle a bit in a previous video, which I'll throw a link in the description for. And, he was one of the guys that broke that threshold of, I think it's 4.46 for the short shuttle. And, if he might project as a guard more than that, and the Packers love to take tackles to move inside to guard. Let's take a look at his size here, 6'5", 320. So he's kind of right in that range of where the Packers actually like their size to be for guys that they're going to take to actually play tackle. So he might be there. I don't see if he doesn't have any measurements for his arm length, which um, it doesn't talk about it in any of his analysis here really quick, but interesting guy to look at there. I'm gonna go with Christian Mahogany here. Might be a little bit of a homer Jeff Halfley pick, but I think he's a quality guard that would step in and would be depth behind and possibly even push a guy like Sean Ryan for a starting job. And neither of our safeties ended up going off the board here, so I'm going to go back to safety, and I'm going to go Cam Kinchins, which might be unpopular in a lot of respects, but going from a guy that was talked about, in the 40s or 50 pick range to get him 30, 40 picks later than what was anticipated just because of the fact that he didn't test as well. And while some of the numbers from his pro day were unofficial still, he did improve, although only, couple hundredths of a second, not to the point of going from 4.65 down to like the 4.4s or anything like that. But still running, I believe one of them had him clocked in at 4.51. Others had him in like the mid 4.5s, which is still an improvement of his speed, um, which you can see on the field. But it's just one of those things that, it's a risk. But this is the third round. The Packers like to take, I mean, not like, but they end up taking more risks in the third round with some of their athletic testing thresholds than they otherwise do. Um, so coming up here in the fourth, pick 126, I'm going to look at linebacker again because I do think we need to double or triple up at linebacker. But then we'll also look at some of these other spots, like maybe taking a Will Shipley at running back to round out the potentially the future of this running back room for Green Bay. So we'll start with linebacker, which my guy here is almost always going to be Cedric Gray in this range. And then we'll throw up the running backs here as well. So Cedric Gray, Michael Barrett, JD Bertrand. So really in this spot, I'm looking, if I'm thinking of a perspective of need, and that's going to be linebacker over running back because we're relatively set in the backfield for the time being. Um, and we've got options for what we can do there, and we've heard that the Packers are pretty high on Emmanuel Wilson, so that's an encouraging sign, even though he was a UDFA. But I'm going to take Cedric Gray here because he's got a little bit more of that speed. He's a little bit more rangy of a linebacker, though maybe a little bit undersized, but I think he's going to bring the physicality that we want despite his size. And that'll end up rounding out the 4 rounds that we did for this mock draft. So, let me know what you think. We'll take a look at the recap here. We got Kool Aid McKinstry in the first round, which they didn't love that value there, but Kingsley Suamatia, which I think is a great pick for the Packers. Developmental guy, doesn't need to start right away at tackle, can come in and be your swing tackle, but can develop into preferred starter in the future, but can also still apply enough pressure to, Rashid Walker, pardon me, and kind of push him forward as well. Then Junior Colson, really the linebacker that we need at pick 58, Christian Mahogany at 88, Cam Kinchins, probably a little bit of a hot ticket item there at 91, whether we'd actually consider him based on his testing thresholds, and pick 126 Cedric Gray. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and come on out next week, Thursday, same time. We're doing another one, and if we get enough people around, I'd like to really solicit input from everybody in the stream on who we should pick at those spots. So make sure to come back next week and we'll do another mock draft that's 1 month out from the draft. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.